Just before we got started, I was talking to George Renninger, and he reminded me of a quotation from the Middle Ages, from Paracelsus, which is given the credit to be the father of Western pharmacology. He stated, and you can find in his complete works, that all man needs for health and healing has been provided by God in nature. The challenge of science is to find it. And that has been a journey that I've been on now for 36 years. It started out being just conventional, down the middle of the road, science and medicine, working with the Food and Drug Administration, which we know is FDA. And we were finally thrown out because what we were working on was trying to make a new pharmaceutical drug from the active ingredient from the aloe plant, which had a history around the world for over 5,000 years that it can be documented to support health and healing. The question was, what's in it? And there were very good experts said there's nothing but water there. And in fact, if you break a leaf off and you let it sit at room temperature about a week, that's about all that's left in it, because the active principle disappears, we found out. And we found out how to stabilize that. And I will now get into the first slide I believe we have up there. That all previous lectures that I've given for all these years have been trying to talk about nutrition in lay terms, and that unfortunately science and medicine has a lot of Greek and Latin words that we don't use in everyday conversation. And I have found out that the people that I'm talking to don't want to be molecular biologists or biochemists, or certainly not a physician or a PhD with some kind of specialty in biochemistry or health management. And I fear a lot of what I've been saying has been going in one ear and out the other without just a whole lot staying in between, become new knowledge for those people that were hearing it, because even though I've tried and tried, I'm afraid that going into formal education for 32 years and dealing with these words, that it's not anything like the words that I grew up on a farm down in Abbott, Texas, where we raised cotton and corn. And so I kind of understand where most people are coming from. And these are foreign words. Now, we have three things that we can share with people. It's health, wealth, and worthiness. And I'll start with that and I will end with that. You can improve the quality of life of health for individuals with more comprehensive nutrition. This started out, as I say, as standard chemistry and physics, molecular biology, but it turned into a spiritual journey when it found out that in the plant kingdom, plant-made molecules, which are called phytochemicals or phytonutrients, are provided in the plant kingdom that our genes call for to be used in cellular synthesis to hook together to make compounds to run the biochemistry of life. That is truly remarkable. And I said what turned out as be a conventional journey turned into a spiritual adventure to realize that what we so commonly throw around, a little three-letter word called God, that is interpreted by many different religions and many different languages and many different terms, but all recognizing that there is a creative, organizing, and designing power in the universe that brought this about. And that's why I say this has turned into a spiritual journey. Now, with trying to talk about all these scientific principles and terms, which is the laws of chemistry and physics that really guide at the basics of nutrition, it's pretty weak for you to go out and say, well, I've heard and they've told me that science has been done. But I would like to start with something before even science. And I will advance the slide here. I have shown that inside of every cell in your body, and there are trillions of cells in your body, that there's a little assembly line that runs cellular synthesis to take elements and nutrients and hook them together to make bioactive compounds to run the biochemistry of life. I'm not too sure that this has been accepted. You've got to use an electron microscope to even detect this in one of your cells. I have pointed out that every cell in your body, inside the nucleus or the center of the cell, written in DNA, nucleic acids, 4 nucleic acids, is a code much like it's in your cell phone or your computer, but far more powerful in terms of all it does to start with a sperm and an egg in the mother's uterus, grow a human embryo, and then for years increase the size of it through adolescence and all, and into maturity, and then to operate all the various organ systems and their genes that are turned on and then turned off at each stage. But always this dynamic process is being supported by nutrient molecules and elements that you can only take in through your mouth, down through your GI tract, be absorbed in the bowel into the serum, and pumped by the blood in the serum phase around to all the cells. And this is the plans of life that's in every one of your cells. And the only way you can see it is to use a special substance. One white cell to the right of this thing is a squash prep of one white cell from your peripheral blood that in it has all the plans of life. 46 chromosomes. You can only see them with special stains that will fluoresce in UV light. Then you take a photograph of this and you start cutting out the little pieces of the nucleic acid chains or chromosome chains, and you start with the longest on the left there at the top row down to the shortest at the bottom row. And this is a male because there's a tiny little Y beside an X. There would be 2 X's down there at the last place if it was a female. But this is the program of life that I have been talking about. Then we talk about one cell where there's chromosomes in the middle of it, in that sort of purple area. And you'll see in there the energy molecules or structures called mitochondria that develop the energy molecules that are known as ATP that runs the biochemistry of our cells. And the different structures, you've got trillions of cells like this. And I've talked at some length about this, and I'm not sure how much of it stayed with people. But again, all of this is due to the creative designing and organizing power in the universe. And as I had mentioned before, what this is that I want to share with you is this creative organizing designing power in the universe to run life. Now, in 1994, the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act was passed, frequently called the SHAE, and it created the dietary supplement industry. The law was opposed by the Food and Drug Administration, by the pharmaceutical industry, by the National Institutes of Health, by the American Hospital Association, by the American Medical Association. All of the organized, what I call sickness industry, was opposed to this legislation. And one of these reasons is that in the preamble to this law, there is a statement of truth. It's the first paragraph of this legislation called the preamble, which I had to have pointed out to me, is not the law. It's just a little statement of why we considered this to make legislation. And I want to quote it to you. It said, science and medicine has proven that optimal nutrition is necessary for good health, to prevent disease, and to restore good health. What more would you want? Unfortunately, that is not the law. In the labeling section, which is law, it states that only in the United States can you claim to treat, cure, or mitigate a disease or correct an abnormal health condition with anything other than a FDA-approved pharmaceutical drug. And that's the law. And if you don't honor it, you have to be very careful and not use disease terms. As I frequently say, never say anything like diabetes, that this nutrition will help that. What we say is nutrition helps manage glucose and sugar levels in the blood. That's not a disease. That's a normal function. And you have to do that over and over again to keep from violating the law, which for a company that I was medical director for over a decade, the distributors that were sharing this ignored that. And many of them proclaimed, I got freedom of speech. Well, I got news for you. The sickness industry has gone into court and said that that labeling section is law and it's against the law. And the company that I was with was fined $10 million. The founder of the company, a separate million. And they came after me just for being medical director, but we worked out a solution, and that's all in the past. Now, the next question is that if we're not going to focus on science, there's something as old as the Bible, say the King James Version of 1611, have anything to offer about guidance for health, management, and dietary choices. So I'm going to that because the challenge of the translators of the King James Bible was to try to put into terms all the information from the Hebrew Scriptures, the New Testament, all the Greek version of all this, then the Latin version when the Romans were the primary government of the Mediterranean area, and then the British Empire came in and they put in a big British Bible, but it was so big that they chained it to the rostrum, and it took two people to move it. They wanted something small enough and simple enough that the average person with not a lot of Latin and Greek could understand, and that's what the goal of the King James Bible was, and that's what I'm kind of trying to do here, is to relate to their efforts to try to communicate with the person that needs this. And the other thing I want to point out, if there's anything that raises skepticism from people, is a new idea. It's threatening. This is anything but a new idea that I'm going to try to share with you. And I know no better example of does the Bible provide any valid guidance that is in the very first chapter, the Genesis. That's the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, said to come from the period of time of Moses, which is over 5,000 years ago. It says that the Lord came to Abraham, and first he said, you're going to have a son, you and Sarai. And they were approaching 90 years of age, and they laughed. No way. Well, she got pregnant. And Isaac was born, and the Lord came, it's written right there, that on the 8th day, and I want you to focus on that 8th day, I want you to circumcise Isaac, yourself, your servants, and all your tribe from this day forward, from over 5,000 years ago, and don't forget the 8th day. Just before World War II, at Sloan Kettering in New York, which was a hospital that was established in 1880 to be, for the new North American continent, a hospital for uncurable diseases. And cancer was right at the top of the list of uncurable diseases. Also in New York City was Mount Sinai, established in 1904. And some researcher got to searching in their records, and they realized there were no Jewish women with carcinoma of the cervix, and virtually no cancers of the entire female genital system. See, that's peculiar, because this was before pap smears, and women were dying frequently from cancer of the cervix. And here, Jewish women didn't have it. World War II was over, and they discovered viruses and beginning to learn more and more about them. And then they finally noted that in skin tags, that proliferation of normal skin, that nearly everybody has a skin tag or two, and some people more, that if you took microscopic sections inside the cells of these proliferating epithelial cells of the skin, were little inclusions. And as they put them under the electron microscope and began to fool with it, they found out they were virus particles stimulating those cells of the skin to make these proliferations of skin. Then somebody got real smart and got to looking at squamous cell carcinoma of the cervix. And sure enough, in all the cells, there were these little particles that were virus inclusions, and they called them human papilloviruses. But then they found out that there were different strains of the human papillovirus that with antibodies you could tell a difference in them, and that carcinoma of the cervix, and this was primarily in non-Jewish women, that in this cervical cancer, there were strains called, I think it's 16, 18, and 31, different antibodies that they had as reagents to detect them. And there was about a 97.7% incidence, which is pretty high, of finding these inclusions in squamous cell carcinoma of the cervix. And of course, they didn't find it in the cancer of the cervix in the females. Well, they went to Guy's Hospital in England, which was established long before Sloan Kettering, and they couldn't find any Jewish women to amount to anything. And the other thing, I began to notice that in all of these places, there were virtually no squamous cell carcinoma of the penis in Jewish males, where in non-Jewish males, it's not a frequent cancer, but they were present. The next thing that happened in medicine was they realized that when the baby is inside the mother's uterus, that its genes are a little bit different from either the mother or the father, and that the immune system is suppressed as long as the baby is inside the uterus, so that it won't make antibodies against the mother's cells and cause autoimmune disease in the mother. The baby's immune system is suppressed, but it begins at birth to start working, and it reaches an effective level on the 8th day. The next thing they noticed is that the liver is very immature at birth. But as the liver kicks into gear and starts making different kinds of important proteins, one of them is prothrombin, which is used to coagulate the blood. And so as it's slow after birth, it slowly starts, the liver begins to function, and by the 8th day, the prothrombin level is up to reduce the amount of bleeding when you do circumcision. And also with the immune system turned on, it decreases incidence of infection. And so there, from over 5,000 years ago, was the information to reduce cancer in Jewish women and males, to reduce infection, and to reduce excessive bleeding by the 8th day. So, after sharing this with you from 5,000 years ago, I've got to ask you, I wonder if that is so specific and detailed about management of health, if maybe there might be other scriptures of guidance about other things that are important in our daily living and choices of what we decide to do and not do. There are other points about nutrition. Fact is, Genesis 1:29, after creation and resting on the Sabbath, it's written, I give you every seed-bearing plant and fruit that has seed, and for you it shall be meat. Well, I've given my lectures to more Seventh-day Adventists than any other single group, and they tend to be vegetarians and vegans, in that it shall be meat kind of gags in their orientation. So I've asked Jewish scholars, rabbis, not just any rabbi, but those that study the oldest texts and scrolls, does the original say, for you it shall be meat? And they just kind of smile and says, well, even today, and it was obvious in 1611 that they didn't think they had had a meal till they had some meat. And even today, we talk about the Thanksgiving turkey and different meats that are the centerpiece of the meal. And what they were trying to get across was, it's important. And I said, well, what would the original say? Well, for you it shall be food or nutrition. They said, well, that's not quite it. The best translation, which is not poetic and all, would be sustenance. That's a more encompassing word. For you, the seed-bearing plants shall be for sustenance. In addition, in Ezekiel 47:12, it talks about the tree of life. And it starts in there that the fruits and vegetables are for food for man. And it ends with words that are translated in different ways. But some of the translation, it says, and the leaves of the trees shall be for healing. Other translations, it says, the leaves of the trees shall be for medicine or medication. That's also from about 5,000 years ago in regard to what the emphasis of what we're talking about in this series. In Daniel 1, there's a very important little story it starts off with about the Jews had been taken to Babylonia, and there was King Nebuchadnezzar, and he noted robust Jewish young men, and he wanted them in his service to be at his castle and all. And he says, come and eat at the king's table. We have the finest wine and foods from all the reaches of the kingdom. And they said, no, we don't want that. We want fruits and vegetables and water. He said, oh, but we want you to have the best. And they argued about it. So they did a little test. And after a period of time, it was obvious that the Jewish guys had more strength, more endurance, and recovered from fatigue. And so say it's okay. And so there are those people that really focus on that guides them toward fruits and vegetables, nuts, berries. And I want to add to that, if you go and Google Dean Ornish diet from Cleveland Clinic, his diet is fruits and vegetables and very low amount, if any at all, of your meats, primarily fish, if you're going to be eating meat. But I was at Washington University at Washington University, George Washington in Washington, D.C. And they showed from the Cleveland Clinic coronary arteries with an arteriogram that were so bad that the surgeons said, we won't do surgery on them. There's no way we can do bypasses. There's nothing to hook up to. So they sent them back to the medicine men, and Dean Ornish got them, and they put them on a vegetarian diet, and then they showed the follow-up about a year later, and the vessels that were all clogged up with atherosclerosis were open. Right there you could see the angiograms that they were showing. So what's going on at the Cleveland Clinic. Right there, I don't see that it's all there, but Numbers 22:12 is kind of important to me because Joshua and Caleb were sent to the north by Moses because he was having trouble down there in the Sinai desert. Some of the people were wanting to go back to Egypt after they had fled slavery. So at least we had a roof over our head and we had water and we had something to eat. But out here in the desert, there's nothing for the animals to eat and there's no water and all. And they were having all kinds of problems. So he said, we got to find a better place. So he sent Joshua and Caleb to the north, and he had a previous excursion up there, and they said, no, the men are giants. The city walls are higher than any other. The water's brackish, and the women are ugly. Don't go up there. Well, Joshua and Caleb came back and said, no, that's not true. It's pure running water. With the cypress trees, with huge utility value for cypress trees, and the aloes planted there for man by God. So there's more than one guidance from this ancient source of wisdom. I would like to issue you a challenge to write down different plants that are listed in any Bible verse, particularly the Old Testament. And I would say go to Google and enter health benefits of, and I put the olive branch first time. Here came a whole page of all the health benefits of olives. And then I put frankincense and I put myrrh because both of those come from resins from trees. And here's these long list of benefits that validate what was in Ezekiel, which is repeated again in the New Testament in Revelations 22:2, where it talks about the water flowing under the throne of God in the Holy of Holies, down the streets and to the rivers, to the orchards and gardens, and it's so nourishing that they produce every month. And it ends with, and the leaves of the trees shall be for the healing of the nations. Well, I've tried to get away from the language of science, which I think challenge comprehension, and relate what I've been telling you to ancient wisdom. I don't care whether you think that this Hebrew text in the New Testament are dictations to man from the creative, organizing, designing power in the universe, or whether it's inspiration. But I can tell you that if you violate it, you do it at your own peril. And that there is wisdom here. And as I started out by telling you, I'd like to also add that in Acts 20:25, it says it's more blessed to give than to receive. And that has to do with the three things that I say we have to offer people. Improved health. You can add value to their lives. If you've got somebody in your family that has to go to the doctor, child, or even an adult, over and over again, you've got a wealth problem, and this can reduce that. In the United States, we have the highest health care cost of any nation in the United Nations. It's rapidly increasing, and the last time they did it was $10,300 per citizen per year increasing. Heaven help you if you got to go to the hospital. It can take the rest of your career to pay the deduction, if you're on Medicare, to be in the hospital very many days, and you can't live long enough to pay for being in ICU at the prices there. You can't earn in a lifetime what that can cost. But we offer health, wealth, and then worthiness. Back to that, it's more blessed to give than to receive. The number of people that I have dealt with that have been financially successful, everything they ever did, they didn't need any money, but they got involved with this because they had never had anybody come up, grab their arm or their hand with tears running down their cheeks, saying, thank you, thank you, thank you for what you did for my daughter or my son or my wife or my husband. Never before had they received the feeling of fulfillment, of being alive for a purpose in giving to others. Fact is, I spent a year going to the Sunday school class of Zig Ziglar. You remember he wrote, Meet You at the Top? One of the most common things he repeated is, you'll never have to worry about your needs and wants if you'll help enough people take care of their needs and wants. And so with that, I hope that you will move forward with a spirit of graciousness. If you go to the Webster's Dictionary, you'll find faith is based on belief without proof is one of the definitions. But if you'll go right down a little bit further, it has faithfulness, and it has a bunch of definitions. And I like the one that says, faithfulness is based on belief and allegiance to a purpose and a proven proposition. I'm going to tell you that everything that I've been involved with these 36 years has been the science that proves that the ancient scriptures are correct. And I urge you to go participate in health, wealth, and the feeling of worthiness.